Hello, and welcome back to another amazing interview. My name is Rachel Morrison, reporting in from Sunrise Ranch, and I'm here with Michael Sean with Boldly Now. And today we have an amazing conversation between David Karchere and Kristin Hoffmann. Welcome, everybody. David is a best-selling author and speaker, and he's also the spiritual director of Sunrise Ranch and of Emissaries International. And Kristin is a wonderful and thoughtful musician and artist and force of nature, all of her own, with amazing awards that she's won for her wonderful talent that she's given to the world. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So how's it going for you guys right now? What are you noticing?
Where do we begin?
Right?
David, do you have thoughts on that to start?
Sure. Well, like Charles Dickens said, it's, best of times and the worst of times. Like there's all kinds of dread happening in the world in which we're living, terrible things, really. And in the middle of all that, we're witness to heroes on every hand. So that's a great pleasure. There's something wonderful about being at home and just learning to be in my own space in a way that I haven't been before. And yet there's times where I really miss the physical contact with other people. And, there were things you and I hoped to do, Kristin, which haven't been able to act on because of this, and then a million and one other things. And yet what I notice is there are opportunities to do things that weren't there in the same way before. It's just different, really. So I find myself with others just exploring the virtual space, exploring creative space, and in the middle of that, having like wild experiments in pandemic cuisine at home, cooking up all kinds of things like tomato soup from tomatoes we grew right here and all kinds of other things. So anyway, that's just a little insight into my world.
Beautiful. Well, I definitely echo a lot of what you just shared, David. I've felt so many shifts going on personal levels. There has been a definite inner quiet that has been present that I realized pretty soon after the whole lockdown began. I realized pretty quickly how much I needed this time to come back to source and come back into a very present dialogue with my higher self, and how as humans, I think we were kind of running on this this life treadmill for so long with the energy of do, accomplish, succeed, which, does drive us forward as beings. Yet it's so important, maybe more important, to really come back to why are we here? Why am I here? What is my purpose? What am I doing? What have I come here to bring through into this world? So I found this as a time to really get in touch in a very present way with my being and a new dialogue with some of those questions, and really hearing answers from, I would say, a higher space at this time. And like David shared, there's been so many incredible new opportunities for collaboration and out-of-box thinking. I mean, I've been challenging myself. How do I share music? How do I share not just music, but like a really spiritual, connected experience with others through an online digital platform? And that's been kind of fun to navigate and feel out. And of course, my prayers and my thoughts go out to all of those who have really been suffering during this time. I know I'm up here in the woods, kind of like David, in the place where there's a lot of nature around, and I'm starting to grow my own food. But I realize that even just my friends back in New York City are having a very different experience. So realizing during this time that every person is having a very unique and different experience with this time, while being all connected on a new level, on a worldly level, in a way I think that we've never experienced. So that's kind of a lot of my feelings and thoughts that have been going around at this point.
I think you echo a lot of the sentiments of, you know, people in our community, certainly the Boldly Now movement of like, well, this is a tremendously difficult time, and you know, difficult time on planet Earth for so many people, and yet at the same time, we've been kind of freed up and released to really pay attention to the projects and the work that we feel is most important. And so I agree, David, it's the best of times and worst of times. And I think one of the things that's really on a lot of our minds, and I would love to hear your perspective on, is that, you know, that there's this notion, you know, that there's a group of people who are kind of driving this desire to go back to normal. When are we going to come back out of this and have normal life? Although normal life didn't work very well, or didn't work great, it's actually better than this, so we want to go back to that. And then a whole nother impulse of, hey, if we're going to come out of this, can we come out of this into something new, into another future for humanity? You know, what do you guys see about that? And then again, personally, what do each of you feel that like is yours to do at this time?
Well, I can just say that life has changed. Like, life has changed for me. I'm a different person. I've learned things through this time. I've had profound experiences personally and then with others. So when you're really changed, there's no going back. There's no going back. There's something to emerge going forward, is what I'd say. And I have a greater sense of what that is. You know, probably like all of us, I'm aware, and have been for a long time, very aware that we're in a process of regeneration as humankind. So that's been going on, but in a very specific way, I'm aware of how that works, how we have something to share that's profound as human beings. We have a unity and a harmony to share that we've been missing. We've been sitting out in division land. And so I have a higher sense of that, and then a higher sense of my own calling, as I know many of us are, to be a catalyst for that, to be a voice for it, and then to come together with others around the globe to let that happen. So I don't think any of us know exactly what it's going to look like. We just know that there's an opportunity coming.
Yes, I feel that same sense that awareness, and a growing awareness, is definitely a major key word of now. We don't know, but we do know that we're in a chrysalis phase, and that we are in the cocoon, and on the other side we are going to have wings, and we don't know what those wings look like. We don't know what they feel like. We don't even know exactly what flying will be like. But I think we are entering this new space where we are growing wings, and we are given this potential to fly to new heights as beings living here on this planet. And collectively, the potential for working together and working on world scales, I think, is we have never been here before. We have this potential. We're all tuned in together at this time, and we've all gone through and entered a similar kind of cocoon. Even though our personal experiences are different, we've all gone through this together. So on the other side, it's the first time in human history that we will have gone through a shared world level experience. So I think one thing that we do know is that on some level, every human on this planet will understand, will have a similar platform of experience to tap into. And from that shared space, I think amazing amazing efforts can grow. On personal levels, I feel really excited about that. I'm also, you know, there are fears that do come up, and I'm not going to deny myself the fears. I am concerned about, oh, what do our personal freedoms look like on the other side of this? And I have my moments where I get scared about that. What does it look like on the other side of this to live as a sovereign being in this world? I don't know. And then I go through those shadow moments, and then I come back into my positivity and hope for the future. And I think that's all we can do. I think if we have those moments of questioning and of fear, it's important to acknowledge them and realize that these are total new experiences, and that it's important to explore our questions and explore our fears, and then also that we have a choice to move back into a space of positivity. And if we work together, we will yield a great harvest, I think. So.
Yeah, Kristin, just thinking about, you know, you as a singer and an artist, you know, if I'm out there in the world, I'm just talking to our audience in general, and I'm going through these maybe anxiety or fear or maybe some anger over the way things are being handled. You know, how do I tap into my creativity, or how do I tap into my gifts? Maybe even if I don't even know it, what are some things that I can do to kind of bring myself to that creative source so that I can be resourced in the face of those very intense emotions?
I mean, that is the question I think that a lot of artists are facing. I mean, I can speak for myself personally, and from sharing with a lot of artist friends of mine, I experienced in the first kind of few weeks of this a sense of, okay, it's more important just to be quiet and not feel that I have to create. Like, this is a time of just deep inner reflection. And so I felt my mind wanting to push ahead. Oh, you must create. This is the first time you've had this free time in forever. Create. And then yet my heart-centered self would just say, no, just listen, be more still, be quiet. And that was kind of my experience for the first month. And I know a lot of other artists who are kind of beating themselves up. Why am I not able to be creative during this time? Well, we're going through a lot of change, and there is overwhelm on many levels. As I kind of moved through that stage, I'm now feeling, okay, if I just ground myself, and the more I connect with others, I'm finding that I can seed that creative feeling. So for instance, I got asked to replace a part of a film, the music in a film the other day that would have had to be licensed for quite a lot of money. So they asked me to replace that old soul track and create it in my studio. And it was great because it held me accountable. And I got in my studio and I had this challenge of creating a human chorus. So I made a 15 voice chorus all myself. And all of a sudden I just felt those creative juices flowing. And over the next week, I have been just constantly going in my studio and feeling, okay, I'm activated. So I think one thing artists can do is find something or someone, maybe a writing partner or someone to hold you accountable, to say, okay, get this thing done. We need it by Thursday, and get that, you know, out, and then see what happens. I think a lot of times it's just a matter of starting, and then the creative energy starts to flow. And Lord knows, I think we have a lot to write about right now and a lot to create.
Yeah, and David, same kind of reflection about like what can we do? Like, how can we handle some of these intense emotions? And you know, if it's not creativity, is it meditation? Is it walking? You know, what are some of the things that our viewers can do to try to get connected to something that lifts them up versus having them be frightened and maybe angry?
Yeah, well, I think it's all those things potentially. You know, I think the first thing though is you got to show up for yourself, right? You got to show up for whatever you're feeling and not shy away from it, as Kristin was saying. Not try to pretend it's not happening, not just act like, well, it shouldn't be happening. Well, guess what? It is happening. And so, like, the first thing is you got to be there for yourself and for whatever that human experience is, and just face it courageously. And I've had moments certainly like that over the last few weeks, just being there for however it felt. And sometimes, you know, there's elation, but sometimes doesn't feel too good, whatever's happening, particularly in these days. So I think that's the first time is realizing that we are strong enough, we are substantial enough as beings that we can show up for a human experience. So I think that's the first thing for me. And then there is simply a quieting down that's maybe in some way easier to happen in these times, but a quieting down and a tuning in. And what I find is tuning in, there's some kind of flow that happens through thought and feeling. There's a creative flow to tune into. And then with that creative flow, there's a creative energy. You could call it meditation. But I'm talking about a personal practice of stillness and tuning in, and then finding that there's a natural creativity, and that addresses our own human experience. It nourishes our own soul, and then it becomes the basis for what we have to share with other people, because within that flow, there's a profound wisdom, there's insight. There's things that we know if we stop long enough to know it, to get conscious of what we know. So, and then in the middle of all that, there's like this incredible love, so down at the root of it all, we get to find out how much we really do love other people, no matter what's happened, no matter how hard it gets. That profound love is within us. And then it just becomes about finding ways to give that expression, to convey it, to bring the energy of it, which is, life-changing and culture-changing.
Yeah. So many people today, David, are having the experience of learning how to manage their homes during this time. And I'm sitting here thinking, and in many respects, you're responsible for the well-being of a home that's on 400 acres with 100 people living in it. And I'm curious, like, what's happening for you in that space as a person responsible for the well-being of an entire community of people? And what do you think are some wisdom seeds that can carry over to people just trying to figure out how to manage their home well with their own families and their own children and whatnot?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Rachel. I mean, for me, and I suspect for anyone, but I know for myself, there is what I call a safety instinct. So if you see a person who's at risk in some way, like everything in me just wants to reach out and make the situation safe. So I had that happen here at Sunrise Ranch when I began to see what was happening around the world and what could potentially happen here. Everything in me said, I got to do what I can do to help keep us safe. So we got very proactive about visiting each other, about having communal meals, or truly not having them, and then working from home and being careful about masks and distancing and all the rest of those things that we all know about. So I think that's one phase of it, is that safety instinct. And I think there's something healthy and good about that. And even though I'm not a big believer in pandemics or viruses or bacteria, I'm not really someone who puts a lot of faith in illness. Still, I knew there was something to do. And we all here, I think, found that to be true. But then there's something else, which is, okay, so what's going to happen to the heart of community in the middle of a pandemic? What's going to happen to our own hearts? How are we going to reach out? And how are we going to recreate something that we've taken for granted? And that's one of the beauties of this time, I think. Like, we've taken for granted just the interchange socially between us. So we get casual about the kind of the flow of energy, the flow of emotion and connectedness. So now we had to get really conscious about it, right? Really conscious. How do I connect with other people online? How do I let them feel my love and care for them? How do we think together well online? How do we have a social experience? So we've learned, on Zoom, you can break people out in pairs and you can have them in small groups. And There's a way you can have people chime in together. And then in all that, you can create something it's not the same as being in person. I wouldn't even say it's worse or better. It's just different. But it forces you to be conscious. And now I think when we'll be more liberated to be together physically again, that conscious practice will be in play in a new way.
Great, thank you for that. And you know, again, thinking beyond COVID, you know, what are some of the lessons that you guys are taking from this time, or maybe even like just broad understandings that you've had in your experience, your life, but this didn't match the dominant worldview or the dominant paradigm. So no matter how much you would talk about something, there was not a real listening for it. And now there's a real shakeup, the real people are questioning and asking and wanting to look at different ways of doing things. You know, what are some things you want to share with our audience about the world that we'd like to create, or maybe some aspects of the world that we're out to create, that they can take away from this experience and think about to bring into their own life and their own communities?
Well, I feel that this time has returned us to the heart, it has reminded us how important it is to do all business and conduct all sharings from the heart. And I think that's one thing that before we as humanity had largely forgotten, right? When we were thinking of doing business or business as usual, so many times it wasn't from a space of, oh, how does this feel? How is this affecting the whole? How am I best working with community? And I do feel that there has been a deep remembering of heart and of love, as David said, and bringing these energies of care, genuine care for ourselves and for each other into next endeavors and into projects that we work on together. And I do hypothesize that when kind of the doorways open up again and we're allowed to go back out into the world, that there will be much more of a heart-centered, soulful and connective space that has been cultivated during this time. I mean, I also hope, one thing that I did take for granted before, I think that's one of the things that you asked, was I'm a big hugger, and I used to hug everyone. I mean, I always, that was one of the things I think I took for granted in life. I loved hugging, and so that idea that, oh my gosh, are we going to be out in the world and not able to just go up and give someone a hug? Or I hope that we can all get back to a space where not only can we move from our heart and from a space of love, but where we feel confident and open to just when it's safe, to give each other a hug again. And how much more meaning will that have than ever before, right? So the simple gestures of like giving a hug will have so much deeper meaning now, and so much more gratitude brought into them. So I just love that that these simple life habits that we never really necessarily thought deeply into, now they're going to be filled with gratitude, compassion, and reactivated. So
yeah, may it be so.
I hope so.
David?
Well, I think of two things. So one is very much a complement to what Kristin was just talking about, which I wholeheartedly endorse. And what I have found myself personally, and that I'm noticing in people around me, is that there are flashes of brilliant thinking that are going on. There's a way that we all knew we had to think creatively about this situation and think about how we carry forward our creative lives and our lives of service. So that really required an activation in thought. It required, and still does, an an intelligence that's natural to us. Actually, it's innate, but sometimes it just sleeps there, and we just are going on business as usual. And so there's the individual creativity of thought, but then the quality of thinking together with other people. I've noticed it's become really elevated. And I do think we have to be brilliant to face the world and move forward in the culture that we have. We can't settle for old beliefs, old structures, old ways of thinking of things and understanding them. We have to be willing to allow our minds to think fresh and new as an individual, and then think well together. How is this new culture, this new world going to be born if not through consciousness? So that's one area where I really see a new birth happening. And the other is through the human energy field. I practice something I call attunement, which is a vibrational medicine practice. So we do that in person typically with a session of something like 20 minutes, like Reiki or something. So that's not available to us in the same way. And we find ourselves practicing online. And so how could it be, the person's not even right in front of you, and yet through your hands, you can share a loving vibration across the miles. And we're having incredible experiences doing that. It's like, wow, this human energy field really is all connected. And there's another area where I just think we've been so casual. We just take for granted the energy exchange that we have with other people. But it seems like these days are calling us to a more conscious awareness of what we're doing with our energy and how that's moving. And then there's the connection of our thoughts and our feelings to our energy field. And there's huge experiments with that to do personally and together. Like, if I shift the way I think about another person, how does the energy that I'm sharing with them change? So to me, those are profound things we're experimenting in this time of stay at home and lockdown.
Speaking of brilliance and of personal freedoms and new ways to orient ourselves into this new narrative that we're all embarking on together, I'm remembering a project that the two of you, Kristin and David, were working on just not too long ago. It was a project about creating an anthem for the children during the time of it was a reflection, an artistic expression of what was happening to the children in the retainment camps of immigrant children. And it was such a touching project that was happening there, creating a global song for the world, for the children to hear. And I'm curious to both of you, what's your message to the children now across the world who are all experiencing the same thing in many ways, but in a very different way right now?
Well, I think this time has likely brought up so many more questions in the hearts and minds of all of the next generations. I was actually thinking about our song, The Anthem for the Children, that David and I were co-creating before I got on this call, and I was reflecting about how quickly the whole scene in the world has changed, and that now really all children are affected, right? So really, we were focusing our anthem in the beginning to a very specific situation, and in the matter of a few months, I would say the anthem for the children can now apply to all children of the world. And that all children of the world will need to hear these messages of encouragement from the older generations more than ever. And as we were working on that project, I was constantly thinking of, oh, this is our message of reassurance to the younger generations that, yes, we will stand up, we will be here with you, and we're not dictating the way that you should or have to live your lives. You don't have to follow in our footsteps. It's actually an anthem that says, we are listening to you. We are honoring you. We are acknowledging that your generations hold the key and the wisdom to grow and evolve and dream new answers and your visions into being that will solve a lot of the issues that we face as a world today, and that we have full faith in you. You are sovereign beings. You are free to dream, live your life, and we will be listening and supporting you. And David, do you want to add to that? I think you have a lot of thoughts on this matter.
Yeah, I do. I think the first thing to say is life is grand, that being alive is a grand thing. And no matter what it looks like, we are evolving as a species, and we are moving into something we have never done before. And the children of the world are going there. And I have faith, we have faith in their ability to do that. We have faith in their courage and their strength, their inner resource, in the beating heart of love that's within them. And no matter what it looks like, and today in the world looks certainly terrible in so many ways, but no matter what it looks like, there is a wonderful future for them. And that future relies on their own creativity, relies on them just as it does for us all, in tapping into their own creative source and giving it expression, their own innovation of their own life experience and of the world around them, and also their own command and creation of culture. Because the culture that we're creating is what's determining what's happening in the world in which we're living. So what is happening right now is it's becoming really clear that the culture we're living in is in many respects unregenerate. There's so many things in our culture that have clearly passed their sell-by date. And yet there are new innovations in culture that are coming. And there's a new vibration that's coming into the culture that's shifting it and changing it. And every human being on the face of the planet, but particularly children, have the opportunity to be in that vibration and to open the way.
Great. Thank you, guys. Any final thoughts on this moment in time? Final messages you'd like to leave our audience with? I'm often thinking of, like, what is our next bold move? What's the next thing that we can collectively do?
Well, I feel more than ever that if we just continually remember to boldly go within our hearts, quiet our minds, and listen, we will always be guided in the right direction. And I have been seeing this on a daily basis in my own life since the beginning of this lockdown period 2 months ago. And I have been guided constantly by going into my heart, quieting and listening. I've been guided into whole new ways of creating, working with others, even doing business in total new ways. And it has reminded me that when we listen, when we get quiet, we are always going to find our next direction. And it's just always there. The next puzzle piece is always waiting for us when we are ready to receive it. So just have faith and listen. Thank you so much, Rachel and Michael, for having us too. I'm very grateful to have been here today. I have the deepest love and respect for you, David. It's an honor to be in dialogue with you today.
And with you, Kristin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my answer to the question is a radical revelation of self and radical connection with others. there's a way to show up in connection with another person where there's far more of our interior space that's shown, far more of the core of who we are and what our passion is and what the commitment of our lives is, far more of the stuff of that to put on the table, and then far more openness to see another person for what they're bringing and appreciate the unique essence and then that unique creative relationship that you have with that person. And if we can practice one-on-one with people, then we can see the larger constellation of how we fit together and the creative work we have to do together. And then the unique parts that each of us have to play in. We can celebrate those parts and not be in the kind of old world, combative, competitive context that just seems to predominate so much of the culture as it's been. I actually believe that that's at the heart of the new culture, at the heart of all the innovation that's to come, is that radical openness, that radical connection.
Yeah, I love the notion of our collaborative advantage.
Mm.
The computers and the competition, it drove something, and it drove us to kind of a peak consumption of the planet and whatnot, and many great inventions came from that. But I think we've ran out of the room for that to be a dominant paradigm left on the planet. So thank you for coming together in this conversation to collaborate and share your thoughts. At the festival that's going on right now, and celebrating, us being together. I mean, it's kind of a radical notion that we're physically apart, but so spiritually and consciously together and able to come together. So maybe nothing can keep us apart.
Beautiful.
So lots of love to you guys. Thank you so much for your.
Thank you, Michael Sean.
Love,
Thank you,
love.
Rachel. Thank you, Kristin.
Hugs.